Hello and welcome back to Rethinking Success. I'm Amy, and today I want to talk to you about something quite personal, a little bit of my journey and the thinking that I've done around success, I guess kind of what the podcast title is based on. And this has been coming up in interviews I've been doing when we've been talking about well-being and what it means to live a life where we feel, work, team and lead well, how things are shifting and changing, and what it actually means to rethink success in a way that's still aligned and supportive. And when I think about my journey, what happened, how I was raised, what I used to think, there's a part of me that now recognizes we're not told to consider what a successful life looks like for us. We absorb it based on what's happening around us. And, one of the questions we all get asked when we're young is, what do you want to do when you grow up? Like, the thing that we do is our worth. And when we shifted from how we used to live and work through Industrial Revolution to people working in factories and now workplaces, we lost the identity of us as people who worked in community, family business, working together to support each other. And it's really interesting when you look at that and perhaps how that may have influenced what we think success is. And I've been sitting with that recently in lots of different aspects, in lots of different ways, because I think how much did the shift in how we work shape what we view a successful life to be like? And also by changing that and by breaking down the community aspects that we used to have, or let's say living and being raised by a village, did we actually impact belonging and connection and fulfillment in our life? And in some ways, we introduced the working world as we know it today to replace that, without actually thinking about the impacts on what it would do to us as people. And maybe we wouldn't have known, right? Maybe there was no way to know. Maybe it's all in hindsight. And, my partner always says if he could have any superhero trait, it would be hindsight. That'd be his thing. And I think that's probably true for many of us. Like, wouldn't we all like to have the gift of hindsight? But we don't. And so would we have known? And I don't know about that. I think now we have better awareness of decisions we make and how they impact society and structures, but I don't think we're always great at pausing and going, if we make this decision, it will impact these people this way. And so should we do it? Because our decisions are really based on, economy and how we keep things moving and going in the way that they are. And I don't know if the way that we're doing things right now is the way we need to do things in the future. Now, without getting too detailed down that path, I actually want to come back to what I did based on what this looks like. And so I am, I'm one of these people that's naturally a high achiever, and I want to do great things in life, and I have goals, and I can be quite ambitious. But over the years, I've really reshaped what I think success looks like. And there was a time, and I've said it many times and written about it, and you're probably familiar with it, where I thought success was about having 100,000 things going on in my life, doing everything I could in my day, having never-ending to-do lists, scheduling my life into 30-minute increments, 5 a.m. wake-ups, gym sessions, work all day, putting my hand up for extra things, going above and beyond, being a great auntie, a great partner, a great sister, making sure that I was showing up for friends, doing all of the things we're told that makes us happy and healthy and successful. By 30, I'd done what most people would look at and say, wow, what an amazing achievement. I'd got it in a career, I'd been to university, I had a great job, I'd lived overseas for 3 years, I had an amazing partner, we'd bought an apartment, we were saving for our second. By 30, I'd achieved a lot, and I didn't come from much. I didn't actually come from anything. I lived and I was raised, I don't talk about this much, but in quite a poor home life, we struggled. We didn't always have money. I can remember where we'd be each week going, that's all the milk we have until, say it's a Thursday, that's all the milk we have until Sunday, when my mum did a shift at the local restaurant. So we had to ration that, where we might have been out of bread and we couldn't buy any for 2 days because we didn't have any money. And that was hard. That was a really hard way to live. And I knew that I didn't want to live that life. Now, I started working when I was 14 at the same Chinese restaurant my mum worked at. And I started paying rent at 14. And I learned very early on that when you have money, you've got to invest it to make it worth it in order to get the life you want. Now, I remember arguing with my mum about paying rent. I remember I was 14 and I was like, this is my first job and you want to take my money. And really interesting sense of justice that I had. And so anyway, I did have to pay rent. And even when I was in year 11 and 12 at school, if I wanted to go on an excursion, get my year 12 jumper, attend the year 12 formal, I had to pay for all of that myself. We just didn't have the money. And there was a perception that if I was working, then I would actually need to make that happen. And so there was a time in school where I was working 3 jobs. I was working waitressing at the Chinese restaurant. I was working as a receptionist at the local beauticians one afternoon a week and sometimes Saturday mornings. And I worked at Video Easy. Now, you will only know what that is if you're of a certain age, but I worked at Video Easy as well. And that was back in the time where you had to go to a shop and hire a video and watch it. We had no streaming services and, 4 TV channels, which I tell my nephews about. They're like, what? Anyway, so I had all of these things happen when I was growing up, which made me really start to, I guess, form identities unknowingly about what I thought a successful life would look like. Now, I knew I never wanted to have to worry about money. So I made money and I kept it and I invested it. Like, that was it. And I knew I wanted to be successful. I was the first person in my family to go to uni, the first one to have a passport, the first one to go overseas, the first one to travel, the first one to actually have a consistent job, paying 6 figures once I got to a certain career level, the first person to have leadership opportunities. Like, I did a lot of firsts. First person to actually own a home outright and not have a mortgage. And that is a big deal. There were lots of intricacies around that when I was growing up. And it meant that I had adopted a version of what I thought success wasn't and what I thought it was. I grew up in a town where it was very clear on who had money and who didn't. And that, I think, made things even more evident. And there was this certain area in the town I grew up in, and it was on a hill, and they used to call it Snob's Hill because that's where the snobby rich people lived. Now, I look at that now and I think that's such a distinction that was made to me without understanding what label was being attached to that. But I knew that I wanted to be a part of that. Like, I wanted to be able to have that if I chose to have it. And so I early on adopted this mindset that said work hard, make money, and invest it in things that people are going to observe and say, wow, she's got it together. The car, the house, the holidays. I remember my friends going on holidays overseas or going on holidays and even staying in a hotel. We never did that. The only way we would ever go on a holiday was actually staying with family. That was it. We didn't have money for anything else. And so I watched other people do this and I thought, if I want to be successful, like, that's what I have to aim for. And so I did. Like, I knuckled down, right? I went to uni. I got that degree. I lived overseas. I traveled. I saw things. I saved my money. I bought a house. I bought investment properties. We paid our mortgage off. Like, this is what we did. And then at some point along the way, I got to a point where I realized that isn't happiness. And you might be thinking, well, nah, of course not. But how many of us have adopted a version of success that we think is the pinnacle? Like, that's going to make us happy and healthy, and that's going to be the thing that we need to aim for, and that's going to solve all of our problems. And we get there and 2 things happen. We get there and we're like, what is this? Like, why did I try so hard? Like what? Or we get there and the goalposts have moved. And so we're like, hang on, like, I just achieved that thing and now you're telling me there's more to do. And I think this is part of the problem with how we've constructed the working world, and we've attached our worth to the work that we do and then what we have. And it's all external. And so when I went through chronic stress and burnout, part of the journey was actually redefining success, but that didn't come until years later. To be honest, it's probably only happened in the last 2 or 3 years where I've been able to slow down enough to ask myself, what is success? Because I went from being a teacher to a school leader. I worked for another company for a little while. I went back into a school role, and then I wrote some books, and then I do my own work. And I really grappled with letting go of the idea that my worth isn't tied to my work, to my output. And then I got caught up in the entrepreneur rat race, which so many of us do as well. You got to aim for 7 figures. You've got to make $1 million revenue. You've got to have multiple offers. You've got to be able to scale them. And this is so damaging in the same way, because again, it's like success looks like this in a traditional job, in a corporate job. Success looks like this as a business owner and entrepreneur, and you've got to follow that path. And it just comes at you all of the time so fast. And none of it matters. And none of it's true. And all of it's a construct. And everything's made up. And I just found myself a couple of years ago going, who said a successful business is one that makes 7 figures? Because I can tell you, I know 7-figure business owners, and they don't get to spend as much time with their family as they would like. They don't get to have slow mornings all the time. They don't get to spend their days how they'd want to spend their day. They don't get to have blank days in their calendar. They don't get to look at their calendar 1 or 2 weeks out and go, oh, cool, I've got 5 days of not much. I'm going to jump on a plane and go and spend it with my niece and nephews. So over time, I started to just really question all of the things that we were told would make us happy, healthy, successful. And I was like, no, that is a story. And we have to get really good at deconstructing the stories we're attached to if we want life to be different. Because what we're told to do is just do different things. You can't do different things until you actually understand the story that sits beneath it. Because that is what is telling us why we're driven a certain way, why we're focused on something, why we're obsessed with that one thing. And it also tells us why we can't change. It tells us why we struggle to do something completely different, even though we know we should. It tells us why our brain and our logic is like, do that, but our inner being, our soul is like, I can't detach from it. And so the stories are crucial. Like, where did they come from and why did we subscribe to them? And what does this actually look like for me? Because we're not asked, what does a successful, happy life look like? We're just asked what we want to be when we grow up. And that is such an interesting question. Now, my eldest nephew was asked this question a couple of weeks ago. He had his interview for his local high school and he's going to high school next year. And they asked him the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that makes sense to ask someone that question. We were all asked that. Now, my sister thought he was going to say, I want to be a lawyer. And we kind of all thought he would say that because for the last few years, that's what he's been telling us. But he didn't. They said to him, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he said, I want to be work from home. Now, you might laugh at that or chuckle or smirk or think, isn't that funny and cute? But when I heard that, and my sister, was quite embarrassed and said, I can't believe you said that. When I heard that, I thought, this is great. Because what that shows is that our young people are observing what's happening and they are choosing jobs based on the life they want to live, not the career we're told to have will make us be successful at something, the title or the job or the status that we think comes. They are done with that. They are like, no, I don't want to do that. I want a job that allows me to enjoy life, to be with my family, to have slow mornings, to move my body, to have breaks in the day, to be around people I love and care about. And that is a shift we're going to see. And so we need to pay attention to that when it comes to what is success for us, because our little people are watching and our little people are paying attention. And so sometimes I think by rewiring what success for me is, I'm influencing people around me, my nieces and nephews, without even realizing. And I think that's a wonderful thing to be doing. But how aware of that are you? Because if you're holding on to a version of success that you think will make you happy once you have it all achieved, I really want you to sit with this and ask yourself, is it true? And if it could look a different way, what would it look like? Because that's what I've had to do the last couple of years. Because otherwise, I think what would have happened is I would have just found myself in the same cycle and I would have ended up with burnout and chronic stress again because I would have got caught on this race of what success is and what I should do and I've just got to keep going. And we just aren't wired for that. We just aren't supposed to live like that. We aren't supposed to think that this is what life should look like. And so it's not about proving. It's not about living on Snob's Hill. It's not about making sure you're on overseas holidays all the time. It's actually about asking, how do I allow myself to be successful in ways that matter for me? Like that's the key thing, right? So it's not about the externals, it's about the internals. It's not about what people think, it's about how you feel. It's not about comparing yourself to others and go, they drive that car, I should drive that car. It's not about going, oh, the latest phone's out, I need to have it so people think like I'm really cool. Like, who cares? So all of the little actions we take, I want you to ask yourself, am I doing this for me or am I doing it because I think someone's going to look at me and go, oh, how great is that person? Because I can tell you right now, the most freeing thing you can do for yourself is to not care at all what someone else thinks and stop building a life based on perception of other people and start building a life for you. And that will take time and that could be hard and that could be challenging, but the more you're able to like peel back those layers and those stories and the things you're telling yourself because you think they matter, but actually they don't, what you start to realize is who you are. And we've been denied that. We've been denied the opportunity to build on who we are. And we've been told to build ourselves as a version of expectations that come from someone else. And who? It's just not worth it. It's not worth it. And I think about what my nephew said often in that interview, and I think, yeah, great. Because here we are, peeling back layers of what we've been told to do, breaking them down. And I know some people are scared about that, especially in workplaces. So I'm going to talk about that in the next episode. But please go away and give yourself some time to think about, what stories am I telling myself about success, and how do I peel back some of those layers and those beliefs? And every time you make a decision, like, ask yourself, am I doing it for me, or am I doing it because I think someone else is going to go, oh, she's got her life together? Because I can tell you, who cares? Like, it just doesn't matter. Anyway, have a wonderful day, evening, night, whatever time of day it is to you, and I'll see you somewhere soon. Bye.